Hello, dwellers of the shadows, and welcome to Shadow Whispers. Here we gather in the quiet corners of the night, where reality frays and the darkness listens. In this place, every whisper is a warning, every flicker of light, a question. We walk the roads few dare travel, searching for the stories that linger like cold breath on the back of your neck. Tonight you'll hear true accounts, or at least stories told as truth, from the depths of American darkness. Tales of vanished souls, unwanted visitors, and the things that knock from the wrong side of the door. Some of these voices are from decades past, some from last year, and some might be happening to someone right now. So close the curtains, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't listen too closely to the shadows outside your window, because sometimes the shadows whisper back. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. It was just past midnight, and I was driving home along Route 23, a lonely stretch of road that winds through the countryside. The air was cold, the kind of chill that creeps through your jacket and lingers in your bones. My headlights cut through the mist, but beyond that was only darkness. I hadn't seen another car for miles. The only sound was the steady hum of my tires against the asphalt. I was tired, my mind drifting between the day's events and the comfort of my warm bed waiting at home. That's when I saw her. She was standing on the side of the road, barely illuminated by the beam of my headlights. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, wearing a pale vintage dress that looked like it belonged in the 1950s. She held a small handbag in front of her, clutching it with both hands. Her hair was neatly styled, but her face was distant, sad. There was something about her stillness that made my stomach knot, but the night was freezing, and she looked desperate. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and rolled down the window. I asked if she needed a ride. She nodded once without meeting my eyes and quietly slid into the passenger seat. The air inside the car instantly felt colder. I tried making small talk, but she only spoke once, in a voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. She gave me an address just a few miles ahead. I drove in silence, stealing glances at her. She never looked at me, never moved, just stared straight ahead. When I pulled into the driveway of a small farmhouse, I turned to tell her we'd arrived, but she was gone. The seat was empty. The door hadn't opened, and I hadn't heard a sound. Confused and shaken, I walked to the house and knocked. An elderly woman answered, her expression changing the moment I described the young woman. Her voice trembled as she told me, "That's my daughter. She died on that road 40 years ago." The basement door. When I bought my first house, it came with something I didn't expect, a basement door in the hallway that was always locked. The realtor brushed it off, saying it was probably just storage, but I didn't have the key. For months, I walked past that door without thinking much about it. Still, something about it bothered me. The way it seemed colder near it, the faint smell of dampness that seeped through the cracks. I figured I'd get around to opening it eventually. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning out the kitchen drawers, I found a key I'd never seen before. It was old, the metal dark with rust. Something inside me knew it belonged to that door. I stood in the hallway, key in hand, my heart pounding. The lock clicked open far too easily, like it had been waiting. When I pulled the door, it creaked loudly, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. A wave of cold, damp air rushed past me, carrying the smell of rotting wood, and something else I couldn't place. I switched on the light at the top of the stairs. It flickered weakly, barely touching the shadows below. I took a few hesitant steps down, each one groaning under my weight. That's when I heard it. Soft breathing. Not mine. It was coming from the darkness at the bottom of the stairs. My skin crawled, and before I could move, a whisper floated up to me. "You shouldn't be here." I bolted up the stairs, slamming the door and locking it. I put the key back exactly where I found it and have never touched it again. But some nights, lying in bed, I swear I can hear faint whispers drifting up from under the door. The call from upstairs. I was babysitting for my neighbors on a quiet Friday night. The kids, two sweet little girls, were already asleep upstairs, and I was curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn watching TV. The house was warm, comforting, until the phone rang. I reached for the cordless phone, expecting it to be their parents checking in. Instead, A man's voice I didn't recognize whispered, "Check the children." Then the line went dead. I froze, staring at the phone. The voice was calm, almost casual, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I told myself it was probably just a prank. Still, I glanced toward the dark staircase, my heart beating faster. I tried to shake it off and went back to my show. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time the voice was more insistent. "Check the children." The words seemed to echo in my head even after the call ended. My hands trembled as I called the police. They told me to lock all the doors and stay on the line. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, every creak of the house amplified. Then, in the silence, I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps from upstairs. I clutched the phone, whispering to the dispatcher. Moments later, flashing lights filled the windows, and officers burst through the door. They went upstairs, and seconds later, I heard a shout. They had found a man and a stranger standing in the hallway outside the girl's bedroom. He'd been using the upstairs phone to call me. He was already inside the house the whole time. The shadow in the motel. I was driving through Arizona when fatigue forced me to pull over at a roadside motel. The parking lot was nearly empty, the neon sign buzzing faintly in the dry desert air. I paid for a room and carried my bag inside. The place smelled of dust and something faintly metallic. The wallpaper was peeling and the air conditioner hummed like it was struggling to stay alive. I tossed my bag on the bed and went to wash my face. When I looked up at the mirror, I froze. Behind me in the corner of the room was a tall, black figure. It wasn't a shadow. It was darker than the shadows around it, like a hole in the light. My heart pounded, but when I turned around, the corner was empty. I told myself I was just tired and got into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. That's when I felt it. A sudden drop in temperature, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I kept my eyes shut, pretending to sleep, but I could sense it. Moving. Slow, deliberate steps toward the bed. The weight of the air pressed down on me. I felt it lean over me. My breath caught in my throat and I stayed frozen until, eventually, the room seemed to lighten again. When I opened my eyes, the sun was streaming through the curtains. Relieved, I sat up and froze again. On the sheet beside me was a dark handprint, burned into the fabric. It wasn't mine. The woods behind my house. My childhood home sat at the edge of a dense forest. I grew up playing in those woods, never afraid of the shadows between the trees. That changed last year. One evening, as I stood on the back porch, I noticed something unusual. A figure in the tree line. It was tall, impossibly tall, with arms that hung far too low. It didn't move. It just watched me. I blinked, and it was gone. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard tapping on my bedroom window. When I pulled back the curtain, there was nothing there, only the dark outline of the woods. I told myself it was just a branch. The next day, I went into the forest, determined to prove to myself it was nothing. The deeper I went, the quieter it became, until even the birds were silent. That's when I saw them. Claw marks, deep and deliberate, etched into the bark of the trees. The air was heavy, and behind me, I heard it. Slow, steady breathing. I turned, but nothing was there. I hurried home, heart racing. Since then, I've seen the figure again and again, always at dusk, always watching. At first it stayed near the tree line, but each night it's closer. Now it stands just a few feet from the porch. I don't go outside after dark anymore. I don't know what it wants, but I know it's waiting for me. And so, dear dwellers of the shadows, our journey through tonight's tales comes to an end. But the darkness never truly sleeps. Out there in the empty roads, the locked basements, the silent woods, more stories are waiting to be found. If you felt the chill crawl up your spine tonight, let us know which story kept you looking over your shoulder. Share your own encounters with the unknown in the comments, and you never know. Your voice might echo in a future episode. If you dare to walk with us again, subscribe, so you never miss the next whisper from the dark. Until then, keep your lights low, your doors locked, and your ears open, because the shadows are always listening.